Danny?
Yeah.
Hi. Okay, I can't see anything. I literally cannot see anything. There are lights and I see vague shapes, and I hope they're people and I hope they're not frowning at me. Occasionally you giggle, so that's a good sign. All right. So my poem's actually not funny. Sorry. It's a poem I wrote in the last sort of week, 2 days. And it's the first time I've ever done a slam poem, so yeah. But it's, thank you. So you're right. So you're right. Yeah, so as I said, I'm from Australia, and as my accent has been pointed out, I've written this poem in the context of two political events in Australia over the last week. Australian politics make me angry right now. I don't know if you guys have heard of Tony Abbott, but he's our Prime Minister, and he sucks. He sucks, like he really sucks. In the last week, his government stopped a boat of over 200 refugees, Tamil refugees from Sri Lanka, stopped them in Australian waters with the Australian Navy, and then kind of didn't tell us what they were planning to do with them. They said they were processing them offshore, which is always interesting. They processed them on a boat, and then apparently the plan is to send them back to the government that's been oppressing them for the last 40 years, which is really, really a nice thing to do to refugees. The other thing that happened was that we have a problem with refugees in Australia. It's an ongoing thing. I'll talk about it. And the other thing that happened was Tony Abbott, our Prime Minister, called the white invasion of Australia British foreign investment. Yeah. In a scarcely settled or unsettled land. To quote, yeah, he's a really nice guy. I hate him, but he's symptomatic of the larger problem in our country. And I'm going to bring a bit of a perspective. We've talked a lot about European borders today, so I'm bringing an Australian perspective to borders, and my poem's called "A Line at the Coast." Have you heard the word girt? G-I-R-T. It's archaic, out of date. It means surrounded. We were taught it as young kids, only focused on how it sounded because it's part of a song. Our anthem goes, "Our home is girt by sea," telling us that the waters, the borders by which the land is bounded are linked to the principles on which the nation is founded. I'm from Australia. You think of sand, of beaches, of Great Barrier Reefs, and the far reaches of the desert plains, of the bushland, of the dangers and strange creatures that roam them, but this place I call home has changed. One nation girt by sea. It's not too far back in history. You'd find 200 nations on that land, some variations, of course, but then our expectations of what constitutes a state are based on legitimations written in societies half a world away, deciding who gets a say on which people are really people. The criteria were pretty steep. All you needed to do was have white skin. Apparently humanity was pretty thin as a concept. Back then, people arrived on ships, crossing the oceans, and in one fell swoop, one motion declared entire cultures dead. They're primitive, they said. We're bringing progress. They brought death. With guns, with illness on their breath, they razed those nations, built a new one. Those aren't real. This is the true one. Now, they remain, but what's the gain? 200 years of trauma, pain, and forgetting. Now, here we are. Today, the boats come again, but this time bringing not invaders, not some empirical crusaders seeking to claim the world for king and country. No! This time, it's the hurt. Those who come with nothing but the shirt on their backs, fleeing war, torture, persecution more. In desperate hope, they brave the seas, pay the people smugglers' fees, clasp their children on their knees and pray for help. See, what we're taught about borders is this thought that they ought to be there, but no explanation of what that actually means. That those waters give us the right to turn people away, to use their lives as pawns, to play one more political move and prey upon a fear that the people who seek our aid are somehow a threat? Despite our debt, despite the course our country set for all of those who came before. What gives me the right to a safe home on that land? Is it because I pay my taxes? Or is it because I have access to health and education that have made me qualified to carry out the work we deem as worthy? What's the benchmark for a right to safety, to protection, some twisted natural selection that says I was born with money and in the right place, that the faith of my forefathers or the colour of my face makes me special? What's more, I then have the right to choose what falls within my sight, to decide if I'll perpetuate the silence that muffles the distant noise of violence, not only far away, but in the very camps we constructed, that our corporations deducted from their yearly earnings, using those very taxes I paid to keep children behind bars. We elected a government that fails to mention the consequences of mandatory detention mean more suffering in the name of what? Protecting our borders, defending those waters. We drew a line at the coast and said that the most we can do is send people back or away. Our anthem has a second verse. It goes, "For those who've come across the seas, with boundless plains to share. With courage, let us all combine to advance Australia fair." Of course, no one really seems to care about the second verse. One's enough and reinforces our tough stance on border protection. There's no need for self-reflection or to ask why the people who come by boats now deserve a cell.